You've reached Hotel Pacifico, your 5-star destination for BC politicos. Press 4 for room service. Press the star key for your hosts Mike McDonald and Kate Hammer.
Welcome back, guests. Thanks for joining us again for early check-in at Hotel Pacifico. Good to see you, Mike and Geoff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, stick around, everyone, for the espresso bar. I feel like we all need it today. We'll do our quick morning check-in on where everyone's at. We've got EB in Surrey to release the full platform for the NDP. We've got John Rostad in Hope this morning, and then I believe Ken Loops in the afternoon, and I believe Sonia Furstenau is staying close to home in Victoria Beacon Hill. We have a lot to talk about from yesterday. We have not connected yet on this. I'm so excited to start off with the leaders' radio debate yesterday. Okay, I'll keep it to a headline and we'll ask the question: who, if anybody, Mike, I'll start with you. Who, if anybody, won the debate yesterday?
Well, I know who lost.
Okay.
Sonia Furstenau lost. She's becoming more irrelevant in this campaign, and I don't feel like she found her way into that debate yesterday and is not, able to get a message out, in my opinion. Between the two main contenders, though, I thought Rostad was pretty focused on his message and was brushing off the attacks that EB was launching on him. However, I think it's a little too early to tell whether EB's attacks have worked at all, right? It's obviously they're taking a decision to go after what they think is a weak link in the candidate chain for the Conservatives, and they're trying to prosecute that. And it's a potential distraction off the main messages, the main issues of the campaign. But I don't think we know the impact of that after one day.
Right, Geoff, who won the debate?
There wasn't a winner, I don't think. I think it showed there's some challenging terrain ahead for David Eby because Rustad absolutely refused even to make eye contact and just ignored him for the most part on the attacks on his candidates. And, while I agree, of course, that a lot of these candidates are extremely disturbing in some of their views, it's very tough to make a point when you're handing over a sheet of opposition research saying in the fine print at the bottom there, you'll see a retweet that says something about HIV/AIDS being caused by COVID or something, the vaccine. Chris Sankey, as somebody that was earlier in the week right beside John Rustad at the reconciliation announcements, so they're not going to throw Chris Sankey under the bus. And I think that it's a strategic question for the NDP if they continue down this road, because it doesn't look like it's going to be possible for them to get John Rustad to blow off people that he's been hanging with for some time now, right?
Yeah,
he's not going to.
Well, I was wondering about that, Geoff, because I think I've heard others I've talked to about the debate yesterday comment on EB's performance and say there was like a bit of the lawyer there. It was a bit like he was, bringing forward the evidence for a case and nailing down the facts, as opposed to, and I was kind of thinking, I was listening to it, thinking like there's a difference between how you use an anecdote to nail down a fact versus you use an anecdote to evoke emotion. And he was doing more of the former and probably needed a bit more of the latter. But wondering if maybe some of that thinking is from the NDP standpoint, they're a bit worried that voters seem to be sloughing off some of this Oppo research that they're bringing forward. And they were really trying to nail him on it, to be like, no, this is real. This is serious. You need to take it serious. Here's the evidence. Or was that just EB being a lawyer?
Well, I think it's both. And I think, it didn't work. It's not going to work. And even if in a dream world they took Chris Sankey out and withdrew his approval, would that change the outcome right now with the steady grinding progress that the Conservatives are making somehow? I got a bit of a contrary view on Sonia Furstenau than Mike does. I thought she was upbeat and she seemed to me to be kind of ready to go and rolling some punches out there that David Eby was going, I agree with a lot of what Sonia's saying, because clearly for New Democrats, it's important to continue to attract those loose green voters that may be out there. And I thought she was courageous and looked feisty. So in contrast to the other two, I agree there's no message, Mike, but her message
it's kind of important to have a message in a campaign.
Yeah. Well, but I think, Mike, I think you're totally right. I think we all agree. Like there wasn't like a clear message from her, but I'll say, Mike, like I think if you've ever had the experience of being a woman in a room full of men and felt like you can't be heard, you probably heard that a little differently, you probably had a little bit more. And she, I think she was trying. I think she was trying to be a contrast. I think she was trying to bring this more upbeat energy. And so it definitely landed a little differently for me, although I would have to agree if I picked someone
Well,
who lost the debate, it would be her. Yeah.
I hear you,
Yeah.
but I think
Thanks for hearing me.
this is this is Sonia's second rodeo,
Fair? Oh yeah, fair.
and
her
she has an
last.
issue. She has an issue right in front of her, where the NDP backed away from the carbon tax, and she could be making a meal of that in this campaign. And she's off talking about financialization of whatever she's talking about, and billionaires and trillionaires and stuff that is, she's going down rabbit holes. And the Greens have this big juicy opportunity to where the NDP left their flank exposed, and they're not doing much with it. So, so I'm just like, I don't know.
Can I tuck into one more piece on this? Because I'm curious, did you guys watch it or did you listen to it?
I watched it.
You watched it. Yeah. Okay. Right there. I'm going to say you're probably going to have a different view. It's interesting because most people probably listen to it. And I actually didn't do this on purpose, but I ended up listening to it because I was in the car and then watching it and was surprised by how different my impression was, particularly of John Rustad in hearing him versus seeing him.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to say on hearing him, what came across was he's very steady. He's got this really calm voice. And it was actually like it was actually great. In person, watching it, it almost went too far. If you watch it, he seems kind of detached and perturbed. But just listening, it was actually quite good. It was just a calm, steady voice and something that was getting kind of heated.
Well, I think with the Oppo stuff that Evie's bringing forward, he does come across as chasing Rustad. And Rustad is ahead in the polls, but it definitely, there's a dynamic there that the NDP are, trying to figure out how to tear him down a few slots here. And Rustad is acting like a front runner, who's not getting drawn in to battle on the issues that the NDP want to battle him on. And that has helped Rustad with his general demeanor, has, helped him fend that off.
Yeah.
Now, as I said earlier, it's not like there isn't a level of, I don't know, indecision or insecurity among some voters concerning the Conservatives. They may want change, but some voters are not sure about that change. And, that's probably what the NDP is trying to exploit. I just, as I said yesterday, I think healthcare and other issues that are traditional strengths of the NDP might be ultimately more fruitful for them than what they're doing right now.
Geoff, did this debate make a difference?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Geoff, did this debate make a difference? Is it going to make a difference?
Well, I think it set the table for the main event. And as Don Guy told us yesterday, that's the big debate that's coming. And I think the question is, if you're saying, as David Eby is, and I think he's right, that John Rustad's too risky a choice, you got to be prepared for the comeback that says, well, you think it's low risk to continue in the chaos that we have now with people fleeing the province, and John Rustad's got a burn it down kind of answer to that up till now David hasn't made a proposition about. So today is the platform, and this is where the NDP team lays out its vision for the next 4 years, why it's seeking another mandate. And it's interesting that the platform is so big a deal for the NDP, because yesterday what also happened, or I guess it was somewhere in the last 36 hours, the media suddenly realized that I think there was a second release by the Conservatives, that the Conservatives were proposing to get rid of enhanced care and go back to the old style of competition on auto insurance, which they've had on their website for at least since the beginning. I think, Mike, you can correct me, but it's been there a long time. And that is a huge issue, because it's very true and clear that auto insurance costs will go sharply up if that's implemented. And there hasn't been much discussion about that. So a lot of the stuff that's out there in Rustad's platform, and I don't know if he's even going to do a full platform document, is really breathtaking. And I'll come back to that later, I guess, because we've got to move to another part. But there's stuff in his platform that would blow your mind, and not much is being made of it. And I want to put a pin in the Sonia First thing and come back to that later too, about the carbon tax and where is the environmental movement? Never mind the Green Party.
Okay. Mike, I want to give you a minute, because you actually were later that day at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade lunch, where the leaders were talking to business leaders. And do you want to what was that like? Was it very different?
Well, I think it was a challenging venue for the premier because the Board of Trade released a bunch of research done by Mistel Group about what business owners think and what Metro Vancouver residents think about some of the economic issues and other issues that affect businesses like public safety. And it painted a bit of a grim picture, to say the least, of how people feel about the direction of the economy, concerned about fiscal situation, concerned about crime. I mean, there were some data points that were a little more generous to the government in terms of people feeling like things are going in the right direction on a couple of things. I think housing, but he had to sit through all this research come down, and then he had to get up and speak, along with Rustad and Sonia. But I thought he was flat, and he did not get in his groove with that audience, which is not his audience. It's not his people, so to speak. But again, similar criticism that I had for Sonia at the debate is like, I didn't hear a message. I did not hear I may not agree. Not everyone may agree with me, but this is where I want to take the province. 1, 2, 3, and it was a bit of a meandering talk. It felt like he did not have a prepared speech and was he's comfortable usually having a conversation with people in a venue like that, except this is a campaign. And John Rustad got up and was more what we've seen during the campaign. It was like bang, bang, bang.
Talk about the bang, bang, bang for a second. Because I know, I've heard the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade's policy team have this really kind of damning dissection of the state of the BC economy and why we're just, I've heard that before. How much was the bang, bang, bang from Rustad point on and an articulation of how BC navigates out of this?
Well, I think my recollection 24 hours later is he was definitely speaking to the problem, speaking to the financial situation of the province, the need for affordability and what they're going to do about it. But I go back to what we said about him in the debate. His demeanor and he's very direct, and he's not flashy. He's not Christy Clark up there and getting people out of their seats. He's just serving up the message, right? And not to pick on poor old Sonia again, but she did the same thing at UBCM, where the first minute she charmed everyone with her humor and her wit, and then
personability. She's very connected.
And then did not at all serve anything up useful to the audience, in my opinion. So, but the main event there was if I were an NDP strategist looking at that, I'd say we really got to tighten up the stump speech. And while it was a business crowd, he was speaking to British Columbians through the news reporters who were there, and Global was covering it, and Rob Shaw was in the press box, and a whole bunch of reporters were there. So it's not just the room you're talking to. So I think it wasn't a terrible performance, but it's like you only got 16 days left here. You gotta make every day count.
Last week, guests, we talked about TELUS Living, a forward-thinking initiative by TELUS aimed at addressing the housing crisis in British Columbia through the development of mixed-use, purpose-built rental residential properties. Today, I want to highlight 3 key projects. The first is in Nanaimo, where TELUS is building a mixed-use residential complex that will feature approximately 200 purpose-built units with integrated smart home technology and community amenities. In Seychelles, our presenting sponsor is constructing a purpose-built rental community, including around 150 units designed with eco-friendly materials and offering diverse housing options. Finally, in Saanich, a project is underway that will comprise about 250 units, providing high-quality purpose-built rental options for middle-class families and essential workers. Through these key projects, TELUS is leveraging its technological expertise and commitment to sustainability to create connected, affordable, and vibrant communities. This initiative is one of the ways TELUS demonstrates what it means to be BC's hometown team.
All right. I'm going to move us along. We're going to go to our favorite segment, Milking the Data, brought to you by BC Dairy. Farmers need guaranteed access to water to feed BC. Mike, what do you have for us today?
Well, it's just a bit of demographic information to partially explain what may be happening in the Lower Mainland in this election. And, most of the polls that are out there, a lot of the polls out there, and Leger had one out yesterday, which showed the Conservatives leading by 3 points, 46-43. They have the Conservatives up in Lower Mainland, and Pollara has them up in the Lower Mainland. And but just looking beneath it, just some fun facts. Like, visible minorities are a majority of the voters in Metro Vancouver. Well, 33% province-wide, but it's, I think, over half in Metro Vancouver. But in Richmond, which is a key battleground, four seats, 80% visible minority, 54% Chinese in Richmond. In Burnaby, which we don't really talk about as a battleground, but it's 68% visible minority, but 33% Chinese. So if the Chinese vote really moves in this campaign towards one party or the other, but if they go Conservative, you wonder about Burnaby North and maybe another Burnaby riding coming into play there. It would have to be a significant move, but the demographics are ethnicities are quite striking from city to city. And I'll just finish off with Surrey, 67% visible minority, 38% South Asian in Surrey. But the other thing that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years is that the Chinese population as a share of the region hasn't really grown. It's kept pace with growth, but the South Asian is increasing, Korean is increasing, Latin American is increasing, a lot of the other Filipino is increasing. So we are becoming more diverse as there's more of everyone. It's the Chinese are still the biggest group. South Asian is the second biggest group, but got to keep an eye on everything else that's coming up behind and how are they voting, right? So, as we've talked about before, there's different patterns of information consumption, especially for English second language voters, and in so much as they are voting, they may be drawing their signals from different things than the Vancouver Sun or the Global or other things. So anyways, just throwing that into the mix today.
Well, and Geoff, I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, because I think it's a great thing to throw into a mix. I think it's an important question. We're seeing these microclimates within sort of the edges of Metro Van. And I think it's hard. I look at it and I struggle to understand what the implications are going to be, because there's so much we don't know. Like again, to Mike's point now, like the media consumption is so different. The machinery of the Conservatives is not set up in the same way maybe to mobilize some of these communities. The issues that we know are polling more for the NDP and more for the Conservatives, like which are the ones that matter most to these communities? Is there something you're watching that gives you a sense of maybe where these voters might go?
Well, I don't think that any of these communities are monolithic, and I know Mike's not doing that, but you can't just say, well, someone who's Chinese Canadian may be veering more conservative. That's not necessarily the case. Just as in the what do you call it? The white community, for lack of a better term, but the old establishment community. The views of the Board of Trade were considered mainstream views, but they were not broadly held by chunks of many huge swaths of the population. And I would say that the Conservatives have a great start there because of the legacy of Jason Kenney, who did so much work for the federal Conservatives during the Harper period to build up support in various communities that were especially new arrivals and immigrant communities and so on. And we certainly saw that in BC. I mean, he's a phenomenon and could go from event to event to event, speaking, greetings in the specific language.
But Geoff, credit to Vision Vancouver and the NDP, who recognize the importance of the Chinese community and recruit a lot of Chinese candidates.
Well, this is a thing where I've said this before, but I think a tool in the NDP toolbox that's not being used is the strength and diversity of the front bench. Which has got people from South Asian community, Chinese community, Indigenous people, and all very talented, and they're the future. I think that's a stronger argument that could be made. That's not to say that there isn't diversity on the Conservative side. There is, but this has been something the NDP's worked very, very hard on, and the results are very obvious.
Yeah, I was having some conversations yesterday, actually, from some folks from Chilliwack. Actually, we were talking about the Conservative candidate from Chilliwack, Cultus Lake, who's part of the Stalo Nation. And it's a really good example because, anyway, she was explaining how for a lot of Indigenous voters in the riding, that becomes very confusing. And I think apparently the candidate there actually is very connected in the community. And I think, again, as we sort of talk about the diversity in the communities represented in the candidates, that becomes really salient for voters. And I think we're just going to have, I keep coming back to this, but we're just going to have to spend a little more time. I'd like to spend a little more time digesting what's happening in the ethnic media in these communities, just to understand what's leading the day and what are the topics that are punching through with them.
Yeah.
So I'll relate that to our next segment, right? Because we've got 16 days left. We've got 16 days left. I can't believe it. It's moving quickly. And so I want to ask, I'll start with you, Geoff, because I think what is, and we touched on it a bit yesterday, but let's build on this. What does the NDP need to do at this point? You know, it's not a catastrophe, but I think they probably got to be a little bit worried about momentum.
Well, I think that today's a huge day because everything now will be on the table. The cards will all be there, and it really be a question of saying, how do you like this vision for the future, or do you? It's getting past the point where a lot of big moves could be made, and I won't go back to yesterday's conversation with Don Guy, but he was pointing out a big move that was made in an election that I participated in that was effective, but in a very narrow audience and in a specific set of circumstances in a different media environment. And so I think it's very difficult these days to know exactly how that move could happen. I mean, David Eby made a very important, I thought, positive answer to the Conservatives' housing policy with his $1,000 a year income tax change. Did it penetrate? Does anybody able out there to say, well, this sounds better to me than the John Rustad one? It was a very big shift. It's going to cost a lot of money if he implements it. Probably not as much as Rustad's, but still. Another big issue that's starting to float out there a bit, I think, is how is the economy going and how will the budget be run? Both sides have just thrown caution to the winds, and we really have no idea. It's the NDP's got a very large deficit. So to direct answer your question, and now David's saying, well, I think we're going to have to get back to balance. It's something he said, I think, at the Board of Trade.
Yeah, he did say that at the Board of Trade. Yeah.
More clearly than he has before. So I think the question for them is what stylistic and not stylistic in a superficial way, but what emotional connection could be made with the voters that tells them this is the best way forward. It's got a positive future to it and averts the risk they may see with Rustad. Very tricky thing to work through, but I think that's the crucial factor, and the opportunity in front of a large audience with the debate is going to be an important one.
Well, I think the NDP have a bit of an authenticity issue here, where in the radio debate, Eby's going after Rustad for not delivering tax cuts fast enough. And I thought, that's an odd place to be for the NDP. And I don't know the voters are going to buy that attack. Whereas Rustad saying, I will deliver the Rustad rebate, but I'm going to do it in a way that we can afford to deliver it vis-a-vis the deficit, right? And then when you stack that on with the voluntary care change and the carbon tax change, I'll be interested to see how they square all these things in the platform and then are able to drive a contrast with the Conservatives that fits with their voter base and where their opportunity for growth is. Because there's been a lot of reacting, and now it's like, okay, now here's how we're going to bake the cake.
Mm-hmm.
And,
well, I think that's precisely the problem with Sonia Furstenau. If I was a possible Green voter, I'm not worried about forming government. I may not be vulnerable to the argument that you have to vote for the NDP to stop John Rustad. I may want those questions raised. I may want someone who really cares about whales and trees in the legislature. Mm-hmm. And she seems like a very nice person. So I think her appeal in these high-profile things is a challenge for the Premier Eby and the whole team, because they don't want to look tough on her, but at the same time they want to make her look irrelevant. And she's a complete contrast. Her statement, which I saw a very small snippet, Mike, was, "Why can't we be more like Denmark?" Was an interesting complete counterpart to the Rustad attack, which is why can't we be more like we used to be, where everything was great and, blah, blah, blah. She's going, well, why can't we be more like other places that have similar populations and economies and have all kinds of benefits we don't have? I don't get it.
That
And I
line
think
when
a
she
lot of
said, yeah, that line when she said it, I was like, yep, that summarizes exactly what she's trying to telegraph. It's this like
Mhm.
aspirational.
Who knows about Denmark? Like, I mean, seriously,
Well, that's
average
no,
voters.
that's a fair point. Like I'm not, but
I mean,
but like
with all due respect to the Danes, they have wonderful food.
and
They,
wonderful childcare and wonderful quality of life
I
and
know, but
wonderful housing
it's such
affordability and
a
like,
bougie message, like it's,
yeah, yes,
you know,
yes. But
it's not a
my
winning
point,
message.
that is the point. That is her pitch.
well, maybe that
That
works
is it.
in Victoria Beacon Hill.
Why
maybe.
can't we be better without being nasty? That's kind of what she said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good message. That's when she's talking about, look, these guys, I'm over here, I'm 7-Up, there's Coke and Pepsi over there. But she's got to keep driving on that. And there's just
Right.
lots of stuff where she's going off and losing, like that the Board of Trade yesterday is talking about billionaires and trillionaires. And it's like, well, how many billionaires are there in British Columbia? Where are we? I mean, Jimmy Pattison and who else, So it's like, is this the real problem here?
Chip
What's new?
Wilson. Yeah.
There's not that many, are there? Anyways,
No.
that's a problem, BC. We don't have enough billionaires. So
I don't think that's what she was saying.
that's
I don't.
what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, let's pivot that a bit to the Conservatives, because I think the thing for them is it's how much can these polls translate into seats, right, Mike? Like,
Yeah.
and that really points to the ground game. Do we know, what they're doing on that front?
They have a 4G problem.
A 4G.
A 4G problem. They had a 5G problem earlier in the campaign. Now they have a 4G problem, and that
Explain, sir.
is ground game gone greens. So the ground game, the NDP should have an advantage there and might squeeze out an extra riding or two if we're talking about. There's always a few ridings that are settled by less than 300 votes, right? And wherever those are, and that's going to be a challenge for the Conservatives to win some of those seats, especially where they, like in the suburbs, where organization is probably quite weak for them. Then the gone greens are a problem, which we've talked about ad nauseum on the podcast. But yeah, there are a number of seats where they're going to miss having a green on the ballot. The Conservatives are going to miss it in ridings like Vernon and those 2 Richmond seats and a few others. So those, when you take those, the ground game and the gone greens, that could be 4 or 5 seats.
In
And
hindsight, yeah.
We're
in
talking
hindsight,
about both parties are probably in the over 40 seats right now.
Yeah.
And there may not be a party that gets to 50. So if you're talking about 48, 45, 49, 44, 47, 46, and one party wins 4 seats based on the 4G theory, then that's probably the NDP can win the election. If it stays that tight, the Conservatives have to blow it open more to overcome these blemishes they have on the ground game.
Yeah. So, a really good use of Conservative campaign resources would have been to help those Greens get those signatures and get them across the finish line, particularly in the burbs.
Yeah, people always say that, but never really ever happens. But you just got to count on the parties doing their thing. But yeah, the NDP got a bit of luck there. Guess I want to talk to you today about the employees of Fortis BC and community giving. Fortis BC's commitment to building and maintaining positive community relationships extends throughout BC to every town and city where the more than 2,700 employees of Fortis BC live and work. Last year, Fortis BC supported more than 300 grassroots initiatives in communities across the province. This includes organizations like the Trail Wildlife Association, Nelson Search and Rescue, Powell River Salmon Society, Fort Nelson Community Literacy Society, Squamish Nation Youth Powwow, Surrey Libraries, and the Caledon Volunteer Fire Department. In addition, through their Community Giving Awards, Fortis BC provides funding to groups for their work meeting community needs. Organizations like the North Okanagan Good Food Box will use the support to provide more families and seniors in need with fresh, healthy produce from local farmers. Last year, Fortis BC invested $6.7 million in BC communities through donations and sponsorships, a 49% increase over 2022, reflecting their commitment to supporting community needs where the employees of Fortis BC live and work. Fortis BC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
All right, let's go. Let's grab a coffee. Mike, do you want to kick us off?
I'll wait, actually, because I haven't even thought of mine yet. So I'm
Okay,
going to let you guys
wanna
go
last
first.
today? You go last today. Yeah.
I'll go last.
Geoff?
I'm going to do a double shot to the Rustad Conservatives on a fairly small but I think important point, which was that yesterday they were criticized sharply by the Niska Sims government because they used in their reconciliation statements a quote from Chief Joe Gosnell, who was one of their most eminent leaders, been dead for a number of years now, was a key leader in their land claims fight. And a quote from him was used at the top of their news release on reconciliation, which caught my eye because I knew that the chief was was deceased, and I knew he couldn't have given approval personally for the use of that quote. So it surprised me, and I was very disappointed to discover that it was used completely inappropriately and has now been, that Conservatives have been cautioned on that point. And I just think it was shabby, frankly. In a sort of related issue, the Moosehide campaign, which is Indigenous run campaign which gives people little bits of moose hide to wear for the missing and murdered women, told John Rustad to stop wearing his because they were fed up with the way he was speaking about it at Indigenous rights and title and didn't want him to be using that symbol. So I think these are small things, but they're important and they signify some important changes that are happening. And as I've been saying from the beginning, I think this reconciliation issue is a sleeper. It's not going to, who knows how vote determining it will be, but it is certainly setting a new tone for this whole debate as we go forward into the next government, whoever leads it.
That is, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that was really the way into the conversation I was having yesterday about the Indigenous vote in Chilliwack. Because it was, how can we vote for this guy who is going to tear up DRIPA, which I think, is going to be live in some important communities with the Indigenous vote. But, and they only have the Conservatives only have the two Indigenous candidates. But in those cases, it becomes really complicated because these people often have really deep ties in the community. So, yeah. And we haven't talked enough yet about sort of John Rustad on the reconciliation issue over the last 48 hours has been kind of all over the map. So I hope we get to come back to that. I'm going to go take a double shot of espresso at something a little off script because it's not exactly campaign strategy, but I have an itch I have to scratch, and it's been driving me nuts because in the midst of the kind of headline over the last 48 hours has been this birth rate dropping. Canadian birth rate is dropping, and now we're among the lowest in the world, and BC is actually really low. And I think about the third or the fourth time I saw the headline with the a sort of like, here, tune in after the break and we'll explain why. And I just wanted to scream, like, it is not a cliffhanger, Matt Galloway. I know why no one is having babies. And I know some of you, like Gen Xers who have lots of equity in your home, are sort of baffled by it. But anyone over 45 is really like, this is not a mystery. We can't afford them. So sorry, it's a bit of a tangent, but I was literally screaming in my car yesterday because, and it ties to the election, right? This is the pissed vibe. This is the like, you know what? You're sorry you don't have grandkids. I can't fucking afford them. Done. It's out of my system. Mike, go ahead.
Well, we got our E.
Yes.
Beep. Well, you know what? Okay, I'm going to raise my mug, my Michael mug, I will raise it to the Conservatives, just to acknowledge that we are 10 days into the campaign, 11 days into the campaign, or thereabouts, maybe even 12. And they've gained some ground in this campaign. They've been pretty resilient. And just from a campaign strategy observation, what they're doing appears to be working. Now, there's a lot of time left in this campaign, and we've seen a lot of campaigns stumble in the middle part of the campaign. You can go back to almost every campaign, you can see some momentum change happened because of some event or some strategic decision that was made. So by no means am I saying the Conservatives are going to romp to victory at this point, but I have to say they've had a pretty good first phase of the campaign. And given where they've come from, their lack of infrastructure, and the very chaotic and unfamiliar way that we're used to seeing contending political parties behave, if I were them, I'd have to be pretty happy with where they are right now.
Yeah, fair point. Absolutely. All right. Thank you again, guests, for joining us for episode 8 of our daily election podcast. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsors, Fortis BC and BC Dairy. We will see you Friday, guests. BC, you can never leave.
Checkout time at Hotel Pacifico. We hope you enjoyed your stay.